All right, today on Fix It Up, we will be repairing a carburetor and replacing the air filter on a Generac SVP 5000. Stay tuned and remember, like and subscribe. Okay, this is the Generac that I just introduced, and we're going to take a quick walk around it and just see what it is that we can see off of the hand. So you can see that it's been most likely stored in a barn. There's lots of stuff in it. There's a lot of farmers around here, so that's not surprising. It's got a Briggs & Stratton engine on it. You can see that it's a model 09719-2. It's an older version. This is, you can tell a couple different ways once we flip over here and look at the Briggs & Stratton pole housing, which is this right here. They don't use that anymore, that metal housing. Most of these are all plastic anymore. It's got a manual choke, so the carburetor is underneath this, and that's where we're going to eventually get to. On this side, we can see that we got throttle linkage, manifold, or exhaust manifold up above there. The other thing we're going to look at real quick, always look in the gas tank. It tells us a lot. So I don't know if you can see down in there very well. Not at all by the looks of it, but there's a little bit of dirt down in there, but for the most part there's not a lot. I can clean that pretty easily. Okay, well the first thing we're going to look at is the carburetor, which is behind here. There's two bolts, one here and one here. I'm thinking they're about a 3/8, but I'm not 100% sure. Might have to use an extension to get to it. Okay, we've got it off, and you can see that this is the filter, and it's really stained and dirty. These filters are pretty important, but when they get where they're not doing their job, it doesn't help the machine at all. So we'll probably end up replacing that. Get to the next part, to get to the carburetor, which is behind here. I think we're going to need to first take that off. As I have a can, I put all my bolts and stuff in as I'm working on something. So back to these bolts. These look like probably a 7/16 maybe. Okay, so we've got these two bolts off, but there's still something that needs to change here. So I'm just going to move the camera here real quick for you so that you can see what I'm looking at. So you see this knob right here? It's got to come off in order to pull this cover off and get the choke out. So usually you can do that just by pulling on it until it pops off. As you can see, it popped off and then it just goes in our bucket. Now this whole thing should come off. There is on the back side an air tube right there. So you can see this is what the back side looks like. I'll just set that aside. Now we get a little bit better view here. You can see all the dirt all along here. It's pretty common on these. They just suck up the dirt right around there. But before we go any farther, we're going to stick, this is the choke. We're going to close it. Or that's not the choke. This is a choke. So this is the choke. There's a device right back. So this right here is the choke, and I didn't need to pull the knob off after all. But I never, a lot of these things is the first time I've worked on them. So when you pull this, it moves a lever back and forth on there. That flap moves back and forth, which opens and closes this, which is the choke. Seems to be moving pretty freely. That seems to be moving pretty freely. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to stick a rag, and then I'm going to spray this down and with some cleaner degreaser, and then use my air hose to blow it off of there. Just to kind of clean it up and see what it looks like. Okay, so I use shop towels for a lot of what I do. In this case, we're just gonna literally shove it in around the carburetor so that when I blow this off, dirt doesn't get up in the carburetor. And then I use some degreaser. So if you see me use anything on this show, it's going to be available in the comments, links to be able to, or below the video, so you can find it and use it if you want to use it. I'm just spraying on everything. It's really dirty. Clean machines just run better. Okay, so what I'm using, I'm just going to let it sit for a few, and then we'll come back. Okay, so before we blow anything off, we covered this, and we want to make sure that we cover this. Because as I see it, you only have 2 of them, and you can't replace them. So wear some for high protection. We just use a regular spray nozzle with a fine tip, hooked up to our big air compressor. We're just going to blow off everything we can. Okay, well that should be good enough for us to take a little closer look at stuff here. Not too much dirt. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to disconnect this carburetor, which there's a spring right here that we're going to disconnect. It's already disconnected. We have a fuel line hooked up here. We're going to have to disconnect that, which I don't have the tool with me. I gotta grab. Okay, we got a pair of pliers. In this case, we're gonna need a needle nose pair. You just crimp the 2 together and slide that down off of the fuel line there. Now you gotta be kind of careful. This is, on this model, this piece right here is plastic, and they break pretty often, so you gotta kind of be gentle when you're moving the hose around. Hopefully it doesn't break.
You don't understand why they would put a fuel line out connector and make it plastic, just a 5 point. Maybe something like that. So, see if I get my screwdriver. Let's take the only thing on the screwdriver. Okay, this is the toughest one I've really had in a long time. Trying to get the fuel line off of it. There we go, finally.
Alright, so we got the fuel line off of it, amazingly. Yeah, I think you could see everything just fine. The next step is going to be a little more challenging. I'll have to come back here. If you look closely, you can see that the ends of those, right here, are star-shaped. Now that takes a special piece, a bit. This one's a Napa E-6 or T6. So what we're going to do, that tool, and we're just going to real gently break loose the carburetor. You really don't want to strip these things. Don't use a pair of pliers or try to cut corners using Allen wrenches that don't properly fit the ends of these, because it's a lot harder to replace one of these bars than it is to find the right tool to do the job. So once they're loose, they just come out, throw them in our little tin here. Now you might notice that this is still pretty much holding firm and I'm not doing anything. It's because it's been on there so long that it's kind of sealed itself to the gasket behind there, which is this right here. So we just gently pull on it. And the next thing you got to do is get the disconnected from the governor there. Now if you see, we've got the carburetor off. It's pretty dirty. We're going to go up to the bench and I'll show you how to clean it up. Okay, now we're back at the bench here and we've got the carburetor all taken apart. This is the back side that was up against the motor. This is the front where the choke is. The first step we're going to do is we're going to take this off. And it's a good idea to do this over a tub, just because there's typically gas and stuff that comes out of there. So if you look up in this one, it's not great, but there's some dirt in there. It needs to be cleaned out. And then we look at this, and I don't see a lot of dirt, but we're going to go ahead and take it the rest of the way apart anyway. So there's a pin here that pops out, and the float and the needle both come out. The first thing we're going to do is take some brake clean. Now I've learned when you're spraying carburetors to put on your glasses, because stuff shoots back at you. And if you don't want carburetor cleaner in your face, it's good to do that. So this is the gas end. So if you put their spray in there, see it comes out there, that's a good sign. Clean it and set it back on our clean rag here. Go ahead and clean this out and wipe it out. This carburetor actually isn't too bad. I think most likely it'll work when we're done. So in each one of these are small little ports. So you can order these. These are little carburetor kits, cleaner kits. They have wires of different gauges, and then they have some brushes attached to some of those wires. I don't use the brushes very often, but the needles I do, because you can put right down through these ports if you got the right side, and just kind of make sure there's nothing clogged in there, which will stop the flow of fuel. Now this one we're pretty sure is already clean, because I could spray carburetor fluid in here and it would come out over there. So on the other side, we want to make sure we spray that good. Then we can take the air hose and just do a little spraying. So I would avoid doing full pressure air hose spraying in these, just a light pressure, just to get the dirt and stuff, moisture out of there, whatever you sprayed in to clean it. Go back to the float, take a look at the needle. It's worn a little bit, but I think it's going to be alright. We're just going to clean this off real quick. That's water. Put the needle back on there. I'm going to set the needle back in here with the float. Put our pin back through. Just like that. Now, once you get it back through, you should see that you can just barely tap it and it'll move, bounce up and down real nicely. You want to try to keep this area as clean as possible. So if you got a lot of junk on your hands, I would suggest going and washing your hands before you open up the carburetor. So we put the bowl back on. One important note, there's this rubber ring here. You want to make sure you put that back on if it comes off, or replace it if it needs replaced. This one's fine. Then when you put the bolt in the bottom, there is often either a metal or a gasket material washer that has to go on there. Believe me, if you don't put it on there, gas will just leak out of it, and then you don't know what's wrong. Alright, so we're just going to go put this back on, and putting it back on is just reverse steps of what we did to take it off. Okay, now that we've got it cleaned, we're going to put it back together. Okay, now that we've got it cleaned, we're going to put it back together. This is the gasket that came off there. This gasket, we're just going to wipe it off with a towel. Clean surface is always good. And clean off this just a little bit too before we throw it back in there. If you remember right, this goes on just like that. So the first step, just as it was taking it off, we're going to hook this here back up to that. There's also a little spring, and there's a little eye hole right next to that hole that these go in. So let's get it back on there. There we go. Okay, now that we got the spring back on there, remember our 2 bolts, have those ready. Then you're going to take your gasket, put it back up against there. You don't need to put it right up against the wall to get this to work. The first thing you're going to do is take one of your guide bolts, put it through, and then put it through the gasket as well. Line it up and just try to get it started, just enough to get it going. And then grab your other one, stick it in there, tighten it up. You can hand finger tighten these up to a certain point until they're kind of just seated in there. And then get your star socket. And when you tighten these, you don't want to over tighten them, but they need to be tight enough that they're going to hold. You just don't want to strip out the bolt. So I'm not putting a ton of pressure on this. And the other side, that feels pretty good. Nice and tight. The next step will be putting the fuel line back on. Now, when I put this back on, I make sure that the metal clamp is out where I can get to it with a normal pair of pliers. If you remember right, we used a needle nose to take them off. Okay, so we got that back on. And the next step will be to reinstall the cover. So something I gotta show you. Let's take this over here. So the first thing I'm gonna show you is that black piece right here is a fuel pump. It's not something that most generators actually have, and that's kind of a unique fuel pump. So if we determine there's something wrong with the fuel pump, that'll be a new part for me to install and order. It's not something I carry in the shop. So if you go to start this and you're having issues, remember there's an ignition on-off switch right here. It's not labeled, so one way is going to be off, one way is going to be on. So one way you're going to get a spark, another way you're not. Alright, so now that we've got the carburetor back on, we're going to go ahead and put the cover back on. And if you look at this cover, you can see that I took it to the wash basin and I cleaned it up. I always do that when I work on carburetors, whether it's just to fix it or cleaning it or whatever the case may be. I want to try to put it back as clean as I can, just to hopefully reduce maintenance needs later down the road.
I think we are ready to put this back on there. Now the trick will be
getting all the holes lined back up here. So we got these two holes in the front, they line up with the bolts on the carburetor. And once you kind of get those in the right spot, you can look through here and move the choke just to make sure that you got it lined up in the right spot. In that case, I do have it lined up, so go back to my bucket of parts and I'm going to pull out the two bolts, or two nuts that go on there. These are 7/16. Get them started on there. And again, just like the bolt or the bolts that hold the carburetor, you don't want to go too tight on the nuts to hold the carburetor. You want it nice and snug, but you don't want to like torque it down to the point where you're going to strip or break the bolt underneath it.
I'm just hand tightening these and then get a little snug on there. And we have one more small bolt to put on here. If I remember right, it is a 15/16, which is, there's a, oh, maybe smaller than that, let's see. Nope, it is a 15/16. Okay.
This one's a little tricky because back behind here is a bracket and you gotta kind of line it up with the hole. Okay, so we now have a new air filter. Just to give you a comparison, that's the old filter, this is the new filter. It's clean, it's going to work a lot better. I also washed, just like I did the other one, the outside of this. So for these, this filter goes in just like that. These little pieces, there's little slots here. Slams through there, and then you got to screw in these screws. So I did not have the filter quite in there all the way. Okay, so the last piece going back on, as you remember, I took the little knob off of the choke, put that back on there, and there you have it. That's how you clean a carburetor and replace the air filter on a Generac SVP 5000.